Good morning, everybody. Tuesday morning here. I'm here with two of my favorites, Trenton and Todd. Trenton was thinking that today we'd have, maybe one person in attendance. We already have more than that, Trenton. So
Great.
You lose.
Great.
Pay up. Welcome, everybody. We're going to talk today, talking a little bit about the COVID slide. I'm going to have Trenton prep you a little bit on this really cool leadership series that we're running. So with that, I'll hand it over to Trenton and Todd.
Thank you, Mark, and hey, Todd.
Hey.
I've missed being on this. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had Todd and his team doing sessions, and if you didn't catch those, you need to go back and see those. They have been putting together a leadership series, a virtual leadership series that is starting this Thursday, Todd.
Yep.
And I am super excited about it. It's a 4-part session. You can see right here on the screen the different sessions that they're going to be covering. It's all built around leadership, getting kind of back in the groove as you come back from COVID. Todd, is there anything you want to say about it? Because I know I'm really excited.
Yeah, I think there's one little thing that we've heard is people saying, yeah, but our plans, we've already had to submit our plans and stuff. This isn't just about like physical structure of how to reopen a school. It's really about getting your mind in the space of what does education look like considering all the factors. So it's not just for creating a plan. It's really about how do we move forward, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that we believe, and we've learned over the years, is that I always say that behind every successful school, there's a highly successful leader, right? There are no exceptions to that. The great schools, every single one of them has a leader who is driving that process. And some of you may not know this, but Todd is a National Distinguished Principal, former Utah Principal of the Year, and one of the finest principals I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And so the opportunity to come and learn from Todd and Shara and Nancy and Dean, who are just world-class educators, especially when we talk about leadership, is something that I think is going to be invaluable. The thing I like about it too is it's definitely going to be more of a cohort environment where you have an opportunity to interact with other educators from around the country. All of you, everybody's in the same boat, trying to figure things out and do the very best that we can. And so we don't need to belabor that, but I'm excited about those upcoming, that virtual leadership series that's upcoming. But today we're going to be talking about the COVID slide. I feel like every time I jump on Twitter or there's some news story locally or nationally about education, they're talking about, what is COVID? What's the impact of COVID been? How are kids being impacted? What does that look like when we go back to school? And we're not going to necessarily talk about the structure of school when we come back, whether we're coming back or whether we're going to have a remote model or some variation of those things. But this is really more about, I would like this, Todd, to be more of a conversation around what are we telling parents over the summer? What are the things that we're recommending for parents to be doing over the summer? And I actually, over the weekend, started to write an article about this very topic. And as I started on it, I was like, there's like 50 different things that I would recommend. But there's also a lot of nuance in there. And a lot of things right now that are different than in the past. So, for example, in the past as a principal, I might have said to parents, go to the library with your kids once a week.
Yeah.
And that's really tough right now to say go to the library when most libraries are not open and available for parents. When we think about what kids normally do in the summer, get together with your friends, go on play dates and do those different kinds of things. Those aren't necessarily available either. And so I'm curious, Todd, as we start this conversation, what are some of the things that as you've, messaged parents in your school, as you've talked about it with teachers in your building, what are some of the things when you think about the fear around, students backsliding or really just not making progress, and the ramifications of being out of school for such an extended period of time? What are you guys telling parents?
So I think it's interesting because my background has been kind of covering the whole gamut of like kind of socioeconomic areas. So, I've been in affluent schools. I've been in really low income schools. And it's funny, like some of the more affluent schools, you're used to kids coming in on, kind of where they're supposed to be. The majority of kids come in on grade level, and your focus is, how am I going to get them to mastery by the end of the year of all these skills that we have? When you're in those low income schools, it's a given that you're going to have some of your basic summer slide, that you're going to have kids all over the place. And so what I really help teachers understand is, the school is about taking kids from where they are today. That's the only thing we have control over, and pushing them as far as we can in terms of those things that matter the most. And so none of that has changed to me. That as teachers are worried about facing this new year of, what about this? Where are kids at? My whole work, especially in my consulting world, is really about helping people identify those priority standards, those standards that matter the most. When you look at a core set of standards, they don't prioritize them for you. It's just this huge chunk of skills that kids have to master within that year. And I think that's what happens, is teachers get totally overwhelmed by this collection of standards, thinking, how am I going to get all this done? And the reality is, if we start identifying what standards matter the most, and even looking back by grade level, so what should they have learned last year? Not everything, but what are those key priority standards, focus standards, power standards, whatever you want to call them. And then we need to measure and know where students are currently performing. And then we have to have a plan for pushing as far as we can go. That's all that we have. I think, our colleague Dean always says, he holds his hands out and says, what's in your hands? It's really about identifying what's in our control. So that's all we can do, is identify where our kids are currently at as they come in this year, regardless of what happened in the spring, recognizing that there are certain skills this year that are more important than others, and how are we going to push them as far as we can so that learning is happening. And I think that's the key.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key when they come back, and I think as people are thinking about the summer, I want to mention already, Lisa, thank you for your comment about libraries have online checkout and contactless pickup in where she is at. It's super helpful. I hope that as you're listening to this, and as you're thinking about the kinds of things that you're communicating to parents, that you're sharing that in the comments, because it's super helpful, I think, for all of us to be thinking about those things. But I hear what you're saying, Todd. As they come back, we're going to have our work cut out for us. But we know right now that there are a lot of parents who are super concerned. Like, what should I be doing during the summer? Like what are the things that I can do to make sure that my student isn't, going to have a significant slide over the summer? And so as I was thinking about this, one of the things that I was thinking about was, my kids are now in college, and I look back on the summers as a time when, as a parent, I probably overdid it. Forgetting that it's summer and kids are a little bit burned out. And, I was terrified that my kids would lose ground. And so, I honestly think right now, one of the things that we've got to be thinking about as we communicate to parents is we can't forget that right now there's a lot of uncertainty. If you're sitting there watching the news all day and listening to everything that's going on, it's a little bit scary. And if you're a kid, that creates a certain sense of fear and anxiety, perhaps, around the world that you live in. If you're being told that you can't go have play dates because there's fear of people getting sick, it's really hard sometimes for kids to be able to process that. How do I stay safe? And so one of the things I was thinking was, if I was communicating to parents about this, what can we do in the summer? I would say start by making sure that your kids feel safe. And that we're giving them some perspective so that this summer has some sense of normalcy. But you've got to be cognizant of the fact that, some of these kids are feeling quite a bit of anxiety right now.
Yeah. And it's funny because you were talking about like what all of our experience is, especially in places where there's a high impact right now with surging coronavirus cases, and you don't go anywhere. You're kind of trained to just stay home unless you need to go somewhere. And then when you do, make sure you stay distant, all that. And I'm thinking about as schools reopen, your kids are going to have the first experience where they're in this school full of kids. I know not every school is going to open, but many schools across the country are going to open in a way that's kind of similar to what it was before. And for some kids, that's going to be terrifying. And so you're right, is helping them understand, adults hear the conversations about all the steps that schools are going to take to make sure they're keeping kids safe and everything. But that is something that best comes from a parent. To, first of all, what we know about parents is to model that emotional response, the appropriate emotional response, that you are safe. So parents can't feed into the stress and anxiety of their kids, to help them understand, like, we believe you're safe and you can talk to us if you don't, and making sure that kids recognize all the things that are going to happen and that may look and feel a little different.
Yeah. So I think safety is paramount, and over the summer months, as parents are thinking about what can I be doing with my child, over the summer. I think starting with that, there's a balance in there between being honest about these are the things that we need to do to protect ourselves, make sure we have good social distancing. This is why we're not having 35 kids over for your birthday that was this last month. I'm sorry about that. And then on top of that, show them ways that you can still function and do things that are fun, that are going to keep you safe, which may mean, wearing a mask when you're engaging in different things, which is going to be part of what it looks like when we go back to school. There are going to have to be procedures in place so that we keep appropriate social distancing. There's times where kids are going to have to wear masks. Teachers are going to have to wear masks. And so I think starting that conversation and being a part of that is important for parents at home during the summer. One of the other things that I was thinking about, and this is kind of going back to what I was saying before about my own kids and looking back on what I wish I would have done differently in the summers. I wish I would have enjoyed summer with my kids a little bit more, and not had it not have me be so uptight about them staying engaged academically. And I think some of that is at times I didn't have the right perspective, in that I think sometimes we see school as a competition, and that the goal is to get your kid ahead. And summer is a good time that, hey, everybody else might be doing these things, so I've got to jump in and make sure that my kid doesn't lose any ground, or that we make up some ground. But I think that we can't foster that notion that there's a competition out there and your kid's in it to win it. We have to keep in mind that kids are individuals who have their own unique needs and abilities. And part of that just means, for parents, you need to know where your kids are at, and then use that information to be able to do the right kinds of things, which we can talk about in a minute, over the summer. What are your thoughts, Todd?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I'm thinking, especially with, my world is mostly elementary, but I'm thinking about some of those older kids, the middle school and high school kids, and who are listening to the news. And there's a whole new wave of kids being very informed in their teenage years, and hearing a lot of things too. And I think there's, like you said, that balance of being honest and engaging in those conversations. But I also think it's coming back to school is one of those, I think one of the concerns that we have as administrators too is, who the ones that don't wear masks, the ones that do, or whatever, some of those conversations and pitting kids against each other. I think that's something families need to talk about too, is that, how do you stay kind to people that believe things that are different from you? And honestly, I think that's a conversation that families need to be having right now, because even as adults, we're seeing people get really flared up, and your kids are going to come back to school with other kids that believe very different things, and your family has had one conversation in the home, and that's something that's worth that conversation, trying to figure out how do we come back to a community that has all sorts of beliefs without having it take over school.
It's funny that you brought that up, because I hadn't thought about it in that way before. Yeah, when I go to the store and somebody's going the wrong way in the aisle, I gotta say I get a little uptight.
I was at the store yesterday. I felt like I need to wear like a big 6-foot hula hoop and say 6 feet, 6 feet.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, and it does. I hadn't thought about that in terms of coming back to school and the kinds of conversations. But I think that is something that if I was a principal, that I would want to address with parents. If I was sending out a newsletter, the more we can articulate what our expectations are in school up front, way in advance. Let those parents that are going to call you and tell you that, you're off your rocker and they're not going to adhere to those types of things, but have procedures in place to be able to deal with that sooner rather than later, is going to make the start of school a whole heck of a lot easier for you.
Yeah, because it may seem like a silly thing to people that are listening, but it really has the potential to really take over school a little bit. All of those conversations, whether it's between kids or parents calling, and it can become a barrier for learning.
Yeah. So the other thing that, I think is a pretty standard element especially, when we talk about what advice do we give to parents over the summer, to make sure that their students don't have a big slide, is we always tell them to read, like that's our go-to thing. And I think it's the go-to thing because it's the right thing.
Yeah.
The other day we were sitting down and my daughter wanted to watch the Hunger Games trilogy. I didn't really want to, but I said, all right, we'll do the Hunger Games trilogy. And we got through the first two. And last night I sat down and said, it's time to finish the next one. And Maggie was like, nah, I'm reading the books again. When I get through the first two books, we can come back and we can watch the third one. And I thought it was weird how my initial reaction was to say, don't do that. We're watching a show. And at the same time being reminded of, that's kind of nice that she's taking that time for herself to pick up a book and read again and just kind of go through that. But I really do think if there's any, like, when I was thinking about like what advice would I give to parents, I would say make sure your kids feel safe. I would remind them that it's not a competition, to see their child as an individual. But that next one is read, even though that sounds a little bit cliche.
No, it's so important. And, for the little kids to read with your kids and help model all of those appropriate reading things, ask them questions. But even for your older kids, like how great would it be if parents engage and read the same book with their kid and have, with some of these older kids to kind of have a partner that they can talk through these books with and ask questions. What did you think about this? Not the comprehension style questions, but really like some deep thinking in a book. I think that changes what reading is for kids. And when I say kids, adolescents, young adults, really being able to read for meaning and then engage in what that topic or what themes that are brought up for you is pretty powerful. And I know that reading seems like that's what we always say is just summer reading. But what we see like in curriculum is that reading becomes the foundation for how you access learning across every single content area. And so that if any parents are watching, anybody that's confused about why reading is so important, it's because that is how we access the majority of information in the learning world.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I can remember that feeling of, oh, great, summer's here. I can now read a few things that I'm interested in reading. Like it was for me, it was when I was teaching and when I was a principal, it's weird how my brain went to summertime is the time where I get to read things that I really want to read. And I think that's we should be encouraging that of our students as well. This is that moment where you can read some of those things that you're not going to be graded on it. It's not going to be part of an assignment, but
Did you ever feel guilty as a principal sitting in your office in the summer and reading? I did. I felt like in one of my offices as a principal, I had a couch, like this leather couch. And I remember like sitting there reading in the summer and I was on the clock and I thought, I felt like I should be doing something else. But it wasn't just a book for enjoyment. It was, but it was a leadership book. And it's a great time to kind of do things that you can't normally do.
Yeah. And so I even though I think it sounds cliche, I think your point is a good one, Todd. It's not just say read. It's giving some context around that, making sure that parents understand that there is something of real value in getting your children to read. I like that notion of not just with our younger kids, but with the older kids too, reading together as parents, having that shared experience, being able to have those conversations is really important. The other thing that I had on my list, I was trying to narrow it down to 5 or 6 different things that I would recommend, but one of the big ones was maintaining a schedule. I remember as a kid, both my parents worked, and I literally would lose track of time because I would wake up at 1 o'clock, and I don't know what kind of schedule. It wasn't much of a schedule at all. And then when fall would roll around, it was just like I would spend 2 weeks having anxiety about having to get back into a schedule.
No, and that's huge for our high school kids. I don't know what it is, but the night just kind of takes over, and we have these kids going to bed later and later and later, and then waking up halfway through the day. And you're right, like what it does is it makes for like a real hard start for those kids. And this start of a year. This year is going to be a little weird anyway. So if you can get them into a routine, plus I just think it's better for people. You feel more productive when you're not going to bed in the middle of the night. But good luck with that, because it is hard for parents to get their kids to get on a schedule and wake up.
Yeah, and I think part of it is you can't. I mean, a schedule means that there's some planning involved. There's some planning in terms of what the day ought to look like. And I think that's really hard, especially if you're a working parent, to try to have some. You don't want everything to be completely scheduled, but a lot of times, if you think about it, in the summer months for a lot of kids, that's a time of organized activity. Whether or not you have kids who are involved in soccer, baseball, or softball, or some sort of organized, they're taking their swimming lessons and doing all of those kinds of things. Some of those things are off the table, and so that kind of opens up new opportunities to do some things at home that may be much more engaging. That's maybe an opportunity to be able to connect with your kids, having some sort of schedule, which might also include, if you have a yard, getting some yard work done, putting some responsibility on kids, which is not necessarily a bad thing, so that they're not just hanging around on their phones or the computer all day.
Yeah, it's tough though.
Look at you. You're making excuses for these kids, Todd.
I know that age group, and I'm just looking at parents trying to get their kids out of bed in the morning and get them to do something. I think the reason why I say that is because, it's easier to get out of bed when you have somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And something to do. And I think that's the hard thing is that kids right now are thinking like, well, get up for what? Like, what is there to do? There's nothing to do. And I do think that's on, some of the parents too, is to help talk through that and help establish like something. And the honest truth is, for like those high school kids, it's a great time to start developing like your interests and hobbies and stuff, because that's how productive adults work. Is you get up and even when you don't have somewhere to go, like job or something, you still are a productive member of society by doing something, engaging your mind.
Yeah. Well, I think even if you're saying get up and go for a walk in the morning, that we get up, we go for a walk together. There are a lot of parents that are working from home. That normally would maybe be in an office setting or out of the house, that are home and probably are looking for ways to kind of engage themselves in the beginning. And so it's maybe an opportunity to engage your students. I like that idea of, maybe getting up and going for a walk, or my daughter and I, every morning we go get coffee. That's our morning routine. And I don't drink coffee. So it's just a chance for us to start our day every day together. And I actually look forward to it because it's just time together, and we don't get that very often.
And so that's kind of, we talk a lot about the silver linings of all this. Like that is like, even just having a reason to get up and go for a walk as a family, or even in the evening, go for a walk or something, like that's one thing that this has given an opportunity to families to kind of reimagine what life is as a family and do some of those things together, which I think is good for kids, to open up that dialogue of what they're feeling. And, a walk is a great time to bring out a lot of just kind of thoughts and feelings. So, or, drive to the coffee shop is too.
Yeah. Well, and, that I think it's really interesting because a lot of this is people are trying to figure this out as we go. But I also think one of the important things is that for so many parents, especially those young parents with young kids, they really look to the school and the leaders in the school for advice, for suggestions, like what should I be doing over the summer? Give me some advice so that I have a sense of what's normal here. And I think little suggestions, are more helpful than we realize, because we deal with it every day and we think this is just intuitive for everybody. When in reality, for a lot of parents, they're scrambling for suggestions. I liked earlier when Lisa pointed out that, the library is still open, like that. I didn't know that. Like, I'm sure our library is probably open as well, but that's something that's kind of nice if you're getting that advice coming from the school that, hey, here's the link to the local library. You can still check out books. They have contactless pickup of those books. And that gives me as a parent something that I can do with my kids. Just telling me to go for a walk with my kids is really important. Encouraging me to read a book with my kids may be the thing that actually makes me think we're going to read a book together. And so being thoughtful around the way that we communicate to parents to help them have a sense of what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate in the summer. Because what I would hate to see is this environment where we have parents who are literally feeling like, man, my kids are so far behind, and summer's I'm going to just put my kid through the ringer come summer, when they've been through a pretty stressful year, a very, stressful time, and going back into school in the fall is going to be stressful. Like this should be a little bit of a respite for kids, and at the same time, an opportunity to, keep their minds busy.
Well, it's funny, like one of the easiest, most simple things that parents can do, families can do, and that teachers can encourage is just talking. And I know that sounds really stupid and very like social, just kind of that whole emotional well-being part, but it's more than that. We know that there's a connection in reading to just language comprehension. The kids who have a better understanding of the English language, more vocabulary, that they're able to like listen and comprehend, that they're able to use words. And to be honest, that's something that I look as I visit classrooms, is how much is a student talking? And so that's best done in a small family, or in a family where kids can talk together or parents can talk together, is giving them a chance to really use language. And that has a huge impact on reading comprehension and just how they are able to access learning across all settings. Like, it really is. I can't overemphasize how important just talking and listening is. And it's often skimmed over in the classroom.
Yeah. I mean, the kids go from being one of one or two or three, or, who knows, 10 kids at home, to, one of 25 or 30. And so that opportunity to be able to get some of that one-on-one time, I think for students is really important. I just wrote down while you were talking that I think one of the really important things is, doing things together, spending that time together, whether that's, reading a book together, going for a walk together, doing yard work together, talking with one another. It's a couple of years ago, I was thinking about this earlier, Todd, a year or two ago, we went to New York, and I can't remember why we were in New York, Todd. It's for some event. But I took my daughter with me. She's a big drama person, and it was a chance for her to go to the city, see the city, kind of go around, go to some shows and things. And I was busy and wasn't able to go. And you said, I'll take Maggie and we'll go to a show. And you guys went and saw Mean Girls, which gave her a lot of cred in her, drama circles. But the reason I bring that up is because when we talk about that trip, it's always about the fact that Todd took me to go see Mean Girls and yada, 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 yada. And it's something that I missed in terms of that experience, but it's really kind of cool that she actually had that experience with you. And that it wasn't the show, it was just the fact that you took her to go see this show.
No, it's nice. It was fun, and I think about conversation there too is, you already know everything about your daughter, so it gave me a chance to just kind of like ask her questions. And it was actually really cute. And I hope this doesn't bore people that are watching, because you could tell she was trying to be so grown up. I mean, it was like you were walking down the streets of New York and going to this, she was just so cool. But deep inside, she's this 16-year-old girl that was just fangirling because she couldn't wait to see this musical. But it's providing those opportunities that allow kids to just kind of see the world. Now, I know that people can't travel all over the place right now, but even just virtually, we tell kids in, in the younger grades, doing these virtual field trips and stuff and having conversations about what you see. And I just think there's so much that we can do to help kids just kind of experience the world, even if they are just sitting at home. And those conversations are really powerful.
Yeah. And the reason I tell that story is really it's about creating the opportunities to connect with children. Like if you're a parent at home, and if I was a principal kind of giving advice, it isn't where you go. It is that you create those opportunities to connect. And those are the things that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they'll look back on and say, remember that time when we tie-dyed t-shirts in the middle of the pandemic, or remember that time when we did X, Y, or Z in the middle of the pandemic. They're going to remember that, or remember when we sat and we read this book together in that summer. Those are the important things that are creating the connections with your kids, that are also going to, create that kind of safe environment, for children at home. And I guess the flip side of that is one of my big fears is that, students are going to be left to their own devices. And, coming back in the fall, there is going to be a significant slide for those kids who are left in that position. And so that's going to create all kinds of new challenges for us as we come back in an uncertain kind. It's not just that we're going to have a slide. It's that we don't even know exactly what type of school environment kids are going to come back to in the fall.
Yeah, I think that's probably my biggest concern, not concern, but like worry is is behavior, and not bad behaviors, but just trying to get kids back in a routine without it being the old routine, and trying to figure out what is this and is it temporary, is it not? But after a while, it'll have been months and months of not the same kind of structure. And who knows, some families have a lot of structure right now and some families don't have any, but getting them back into the groove of things. But what I know about kids is they are very adaptive, and that when teachers set things up the right way, kids follow. It's funny, like in preparing for this session, thinking about the COVID slide, I tend to not be so worried about it. I think kids are dynamic, that they will learn. Teachers will figure out how to address those needs. There will be gaps, but we'll figure out how to identify the most important parts. We're going to see learning. We're going to be thrilled with the learning we see. We're going to push kids. And I think a year from now, we're going to be okay. I think the one thing that doesn't help is if people are so worried about it, it lets their anxiety get the best of them and kind of get caught up in that there's nothing we can do about it now other than prepare for it. And so let's just face kids where they are and just push them as much as we can to learn the things that they need. That's what we do every day.
It's funny, when you were saying that, it reminds me that I remember having conversations with teachers who would get really wound up about the minutia. When you were talking about standards earlier and the importance of just identifying what kids are supposed to know during this time, and let's find the big things and address some of those things. And I remember having conversations with teachers and saying, what do we expect our students to be able to do when they leave elementary school? We expect them to be able to read and comprehend really well. Like that, you should leave elementary school a pretty proficient reader. I expect you to be able to write when you leave elementary school, and write fairly well, like be able to form your sentences, create paragraphs, and create meaning through words. Like I expect that to happen. You should have a really good sense of the world you live in, like who you are, where you're from, and where you are in this bigger global world, and the history that kind of is associated with those things. Have a certain sense of what makes this world the world we live in from a scientific perspective. But that's pretty good. Like that's about where we need kids. And sometimes we get so caught up in all of the minutia as we think about the summer slide. It creates anxiety for teachers and for principals as they're thinking about, what are we going to do when the kids come back? And what I hope is that when kids come back, we love them. We create safe environments for them. We figure out where they are and what their individual needs are, and we go from there. But as we're giving advice to parents over the summer, that advice should be in alignment with that. Create a safe environment at home, do those kinds of things that we've just talked about.
And I think sometimes teachers get caught up in like the assessments of the past or even the ones they're anticipating in the future. So in our district and many districts, we have these established benchmark assessments and stuff. And teachers always think, yeah, but what about this? They've got to do all these things. Well, listen, every single day I have this list of things I should get done. And any mom out there, or working mom, especially as a teacher or whatever, you have 100 things on that list of things you need to get done today. But the reality is, you already know you're only going to get 10 of those things done. It's not that different from the world we live in every single day. Yes, I have all these things I should get done or I really need to get done. But we somehow rank in our personal lives, but if I have to, if I get nothing else done, these 5 things I have to get done. And it's the same way in school. Yes, there's 100 things we need to be teaching and get our kids on par for. But it's not that different. It shouldn't be that hard for teachers to, when I say this, I mean administrators need to help make it not so hard, and districts need to help make it not so hard for teachers to be able to really prioritize those things that they know matter most. And that's what this is all about. Whether it's the COVID issue or whether it's low-income schools or whatever, it's about helping teachers identify the things that matter the most and say, if nothing else, I'm going to make sure my kids really know this, that they can read and comprehend and discuss the things that they're reading, that they can write, and that regardless of the genre, that they can write something and really put their feelings into writing and make good word choices and make it, say what I want it to say, that they have the basic understanding of all those math skills. None of that has changed, but we just get really caught up in the other 90 things on our to-do list that we forget to prioritize the top 10.
Yeah. Well, and I think that to me kind of encapsulates what I was hoping we would kind of get to in this conversation, which is, as we are talking to parents, we have to approach it from the standpoint the parents are worried. They're worried about where their kids are at. They're worried about, what the impacts of COVID have been on their children's education. Are they behind? Are they going to be okay? Is this going to be, we created an insurmountable obstacle in trying to get our kids back on track. And they're looking for leadership and guidance from the schools, from our principals, from our teachers over the summer months to say, what should I be doing? And I think understanding that this isn't a competition. This is truly about making sure kids feel safe, that they're in an environment where learning is continuing to happen, but in a way that is kind of in alignment with what should be happening during the summer. Read with your kids, spend some time together. If there are some serious deficiencies academically, we should be communicating that directly to parents. Like if I know that, hey, Todd is really, 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 really struggling, that's a separate conversation that I want to have with, Todd's parents to be able to address, like, here's some other suggestions that we would recommend that maybe are a little bit more academic, but otherwise, like, trying to reassure parents because they're looking to us for guidance right now.
Yeah. And, one thing that I would tell parents too is, as a result of the past couple months, we are better poised than ever to use an online platform and an in-person or whatever as we move forward, so kids can get that individualized support in a way that's better than it's ever been. And parents will have that. So I think this actually in the long run has helped us put a few new tools in our bag. And I know that from our faculty, our teachers are seeing all the possibilities from the things they learned in the spring to incorporate into what used to be their normal and maximizing learning in a whole new way. And so that's something exciting for parents is, yes, we had a weird spring and it's going to be a weird start this year, but every time we adapt, we're adding these tools to our toolbox, and kids are going to be better, or schools are going to be better poised than ever to address the individual needs of students in a way that can be really powerful and help those kids. Even just the fact that our IEPs, we started doing them virtually. I mean, for some parents, they came back and thought, hallelujah. It was hard to get out of work by 3, to come to school and have a meeting. It's not like they could just miss the last half hour of work. I mean, it's big, and being able to allow them to be flexible with that and and realizing we can still have a really good meeting. So some of those virtual tools have really kind of changed the face of education, even as we go back into the normal of what school's been in the past. So I think it's a great thing. It's not ideal. Nobody wanted to go through this, but I think we've learned a lot, and it's going to be a good thing for kids in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of end it, Todd. I mean, that's a good summary of things. I think we have learned a lot. I think that we're going to continue to learn moving forward, and as we kind of transition from the summer months into getting back into school, it's going to come very, very quickly. The need for leadership and thoughtfulness and guidance is going to be paramount. So hopefully, as we have this conversation, certainly we're not the end all be all, but hopefully that hopefully it just gets your brain kind of thinking about the ways that you would address this, some of the things that you're thinking about. And moving forward, one of the things that I would highly recommend, not just because Todd is a good friend of mine and I think he's absolutely brilliant, but I know that his team has worked incredibly hard to put together this leadership series that is absolutely phenomenal. Great opportunity to kind of come together with a group of other administrators from around the country to talk about these very issues, to get some suggestions and support. If you're a Canvas user, I think it's going to be huge. If you've used Mastery Connect, it's going to be huge. If you're new to both, it's going to be huge. But it really is a phenomenal program and an opportunity to get to work with and meet Nancy and Dean and Todd and Shara. Todd, you got anything else to say before we go?
No, it's been, I think, just that vote of confidence that teachers need to remember, like, we were built for this. Like, we live in an adaptive world. Like, we're going to come back and be strong, and kids are going to be okay. Teachers are going to be okay. We got this.
Yeah, that was perfect. And I do want to comment. I knew when I said you got anything else and you said no, I knew you did. I knew you had something else there, Todd. So anyway, thanks, Todd, for joining us. Thanks, Mark, for facilitating this. And thanks, everybody who joined. And hopefully this just kind of piqued your interest, your thoughts, and get you thinking about how we can better support parents at home, how we can start to think about addressing the summer slide, the COVID slide. And hopefully you'll join us again next week.
Thanks, Trenton.